Tonight, we welcome artist and curator, or artist-curator, Micah Lexier, again to the series. He was supposed to visit last spring, but we got shut down by a snowstorm, some of you may recall. Concordia and the whole of Montreal pretty much closed for the day, while Toronto, facing the same storm, kept chugging along, an unusual reversal. All set to fly from Billy Bishop, Micah generously agreed to reschedule the visit. We're happy to offer you this much better weather as a consolation, Micah. I first learned about Micah's work during a trip to Vegas, of all places, a couple of years ago. Don't worry, you don't have any work installed there.
I do.
You do?
Yeah.
We didn't see it.
It's in the Bellagio Hotel.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh my God. After returning from a soul-crushing day at the Bellagio and on the Strip, a friend told me about one of his favorite works by Micah. It's at the top here, 2 equal texts from 2007 with Christian Book. The idea is charming and crystal clear, and the execution is signature Micah, sleek, parsimonious, and immediate. The piece was like a balm for us, a playful and intimate use of artists' words that contrasted sharply with the assault of commercial signage in Vegas. I was excited to learn about Micah's art that winter, but rather late to the party. He's presented over 100 solo exhibitions, participated in more than 200 group exhibitions, and has produced a dozen permanent public commissions. In 2013, the Power Plant Art Gallery hosted a 15-year survey exhibition of his work entitled 1 and 2 and More Than 2. In 2015, Micah was honored with the Governor General's Award in Visual and Media Arts. His work is in numerous public and corporate collections, including the British Museum, the Bellagio, the Contemporary Art Gallery of Sydney, Australia, the National Gallery of Canada, Ottawa, the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto, the Vancouver Art Gallery, and down the street at our very own Musée d'Art Contemporain in Montreal. This summer, 2 of Micah's works were installed at the NGC's new contemporary galleries. All numbers are equal, 2,000 ongoing, 2,000 to the present, and I Am the Coin from 2010. The numbers are arranged in a familiar sequence, but cut to occupy the same amount of space. And the coins are inscribed with letters to tell a story, written by Derek McCormick, about a secret location in the grid of one of the coins, the story's narrator. Like the piece that saved my friend and I in Vegas, these 2 draw our attention to the all too often ignored possibilities of mystery, individuality, and invention in the most structured places. How do ideas, artistic and otherwise, pass between us? How are they formed and reformed, shaped and stamped out by the very act of sharing, and by the good faith sharing requires of us? Micah's work gives rise to these questions about artistic and interpersonal dialogues. It also responds to pressures we all face in and beyond the gallery, in public spaces as they spring up materially and symbolically around us. Micah's work for me gives voice to a kind of radical democratic impulse, a belief in the possibility of equality, individuality, and open collaboration within the very symbolic systems, language, number, and money here, that often reinforce social hierarchies. Micah, we're thrilled to have you with us. Please join me in welcoming him.
So thanks all for coming, and let's get started. I mean, one of the nice things about giving a talk is it gives me a chance to kind of stop and pause and give some structure to things. I'm one of the really lucky people that for the last probably 30 years has made a living making art, pretty much doing that all the time. And you'll see from what I show you, it ranges from like free giveaways to just regular gallery work to massive public sculptures. And I try to bring the same sensibility to all those things. I try to follow my heart. I try to trust my intuition, and I don't really think I have a program. I think that's someone else's job to kind of put it together. It's really nice to hear someone like say some words about your work and bring things together under certain umbrellas. It's not how I work or think. I move forward, and I especially trust things like the thing that's the anomaly, the thing you're not supposed to do or not like you did before. And ultimately, it finds some way to connect with what you've done before. So that's definitely been a kind of guiding principle for my work. And so, yeah, it's the delicate balance between like being consistent and just doing what feels right, and somehow over a long period of time, those two things come together in a really nice way. For some reason, I've given dozens of these talks. I've never given a list or enumerated things that I feel are in my work, but these are some of the things that I feel my work's about: lists, handwriting, numbers, presentations, signage, found imagery, portraiture, increment. Can people hear me at the back? We're good? Okay, because it seems really soft, but I guess they have good acoustics. Increment, audience, abstraction, scale, line drawings, pointing at, pointing to, I'm not sure what the difference is, organization, letters, measurement, puzzles, framing, simplicity, everyday, connecting, games, passage of time, duality, participation, ephemera, systems, collections, and family. I'm going to start with a picture of my parents from 1973. That's Debbie Lexier on the right, looking very stylish, and Easton Lexier on the left. They're both with us still. My dad's 91, drives to the gym every morning, puts us all to shame. My mother's not as lucky as that, but enough said. My mom was an interior designer, and my dad is an engineer. And I really think, if you know anything about my work, I'm kind of like this thing, like right in the middle of that. You know, sometimes just like a little to the left, and other times it's about this like really simple solution. And I find I'm moving back and forth between those two poles. And so not only am I like physically, the outcome of those two, but I think also kind of like, I don't know what that other word would be. You fill in the gap for that one, but that other thing. And you'll see as I show the work, there's things that are much more kind of decorative and just about style, and there's other things that are really smart, like solutions to things. I love, okay, you guys are students, and that is not like any different. You're an artist now, is what I'm trying to say. The things that attracted me as a student are the things that have still sustained me. And you think as a student, like, oh, I got an assignment, I have to do something in response to that assignment, I'm going to do this. Well, again, that coming back to that intuition and gut and everything, in my experience, the things that you're interested in now will always be the things that you're interested in. I mean, they'll mutate and other things will join to them. So it's kind of nice looking back at work. This is a work from, when did I say it was from? 1992. So what's the math? 25 years ago, right? 92? Yeah. But still, I'm really proud of it and really feel like it connects to everything that I do now. It's a piece called Two Kinds of Confidence. And one thing you should know about me is I don't have any facility. Like I can't draw, I can't really do anything. I'm not really good with my hands. I hire everybody to do everything. And that started when I was a student. I was a really good waiter, and I would make money and then hire like my friend's father, who was a carpenter, to make my assignment for class. And so right away, it was very clear to me that it wasn't about the ability to make the thing, it was about the thing that needed to be made. And no teachers of mine, well, one teacher, had a problem with the fact that I didn't fabricate my own work or whatever like that. I brought a thing to class that was my work that got fabricated by other people, and that's just the way I worked. And that's something that's thread itself through my practice. So this was a sculpture where I noticed where I lived, where I was traveling, I noticed the sign making company, and I've always been fascinated by signs and symbols and the ability of someone to hand draw a letter. That art is gone now, everything is just like, laser cut vinyl or whatever. But for a while, there were sign companies with hand sign painters. And I walked into this sign company and I said, who works here? And they said, we have Peter and John and Robert. And I said, I'll have Robert, please. So Robert came out and I said, I want you to cut me 2 pieces of glass, like 9 by 12 or whatever, and I want you to choose a typeface, and I want you to sign your name, like print your name, Robert, in a typeface of your choosing, like with pen, like with ink and something. And I said, when would that be ready? He said, like Thursday. So I came back on Thursday, and he looked at it. It's great. And I said, so now with that other piece, and on this piece of paper, I want you to sign your name. He's like, okay. I said, now I want you to blow that up and silk screen that onto the other piece of glass. So it's a portrait because I made this portrait of this person, Robert, but it's a self-portrait because Robert made his own portrait. And the two kinds of confidence was like the ability to just, the skill as an individual or as a professional to do that sign painting, and just like this other, just the ability that we have to just sign our own name, like these sort of, the personal and the sort of like public presentation of confidence. And it's a piece that's always had resonance for me. And this theme of duality, signature, portraiture, some of those words that I gave you is like found like kind of within this piece, and it's a piece that's had a lot of resonance for me over the years. And I'm proud to talk about it 25 years later. 2 years later, I did one of my earliest public sculptures. It's called A Portrait of My Grandfather. I apologize for that photograph, but it's this massive, massive, like circular screen. Can you sort of read the image? It's circular. It's made up a little, like a kind of a mesh. Can you see that? You can see the scale, right? It's like 3 stories tall. Well, what it is it's, now you can get a better idea. It's made up of it's made up of like almost 30,000 X's. And what those X's are, can you guys see that now? Okay. My last name is Lexier, and my grandfather's name is Lexier, Jack Lexier. And I found a book with his handwriting in it. So that X is my grandfather's handwriting of the X in the letter in the name Lexier. I took that X and I blew it up to maybe 3 inches tall and had a custom die made and stamped it out of stainless steel, or had someone stamp it out of steel with little holes in the corner of each X. It's a portrait of my grandfather representing every day he was alive. There's 29,064 X's, one for every day that he was alive. It was a commission for a school of management in Calgary called Scurfield Hall. And nothing against Mr. Scurfield, but my grandfather was quite an anonymous person who, worked in a United Cigar Store, in a movie theater, and a shoe store his whole life. He was a nobody. He was just a regular guy. And so I like this contrast between Scurfield Hall, who made a lot of money and got to name a building after him, and my grandfather, who lived a kind of anonymous hall. And so again, these two portraits are coexisting. Mr. Scurfield, for making lots of money, and I'm sure he was a great guy, and my grandfather, who was my grandfather. And so that was his luck in this thing by being the subject of my work. I didn't have a particularly good or bad relationship with him. It wasn't about that. It was really about pairing two individuals against each other. One sort of exemplary and one anonymous, not unlike the Robert twice. But here's the sort of engineer in me. One thing that came together, and this is something I love when working on things. I'm going to cut to one of the last things I'm going to show you is my power plant show, and I curated a show called Let It Make Itself, More Than Two, Let It Make Itself. And one thing I've realized over time is that like objects have a life of their own, and that comes back to that idea of like kind of intuition. Like we're not necessarily totally in control. And if we just kind of listen to forces around us, like things get answered for us in certain kinds of ways. And you're on the right track when you're making something, when it all kind of falls together. I'm sure you've all had that experience. You've had projects where they don't come together. You have projects where just everything falls like tips in the right direction. And this was an example of somebody just tipping in the right direction, because the whole idea of picking my grandfather, the fact that he had the name Lexier, the fact that I found a book with his name Lexier in it, the fact that the X was this perfect form to construct this structure, the fact that an X is something where you mark off a calendar, like if you have a calendar and you mark off the day, so an X represents a day, but also if you want someone to sign something, you often put an X, sign at the X, so it also represents like an individual. So all of that came together, but also just structurally to be able to make this structure, it's self-supporting. It's just each little X is joined to the next X with a little split ring. So there's no other structure but itself. It's this very self-contained piece. It's massive, but because it's the X, very little surface area, so you can see through it, so you can have something that has like presence, but also still is like not kind of an affront, it doesn't take over the building. So this idea of portraiture is something that runs its way through my work. This idea of collaboration is something that runs its way through my work. I was invited to do a project with a high school, like this very cool high school in Mississauga. And the teacher said, oh, come and do a workshop. I'm like, I can't do a workshop. I don't have any skills. Like, there's nothing I can teach someone to do. But what I will do is make a project with the students, and together we'll learn about sort of conceptual art or something like that. So my idea was, I asked how many students there were in the high school, and there was 1,334 students in the high school. And then through some friends of friends, I got to a very famous writer. Does anyone know the writer Colm Toibin? Yeah? Does anyone know a book that he's written? Name a book. Oh, okay. See, I have giveaways. I have free. See, this is like, if you know the answer, you get a free, there's like prizes. So anyways, he's a great Irish writer. He's was nominated for the Booker 3 times. That doesn't mean he's a great writer, but he was. He's a really nice guy. And someone like that, like to ask him to write a short story to a word count is kind of like offensive. But luckily he was a very good sport, and he agreed to write this short story to the word count of 1,334 words. So once he had that 1,334 words, I then took it to this class. I said to them, okay, you guys, I've got the project, but you have to solve it. The project is I want you to get every student in the high school to handwrite one of the words in Colm's story. And so it's going to become a kind of collected portrait of the high school through handwriting. And so we only have an hour, so I'm not going to tell you the whole story of how they did it, but they had to solve the problem of how to get their fellow students to handwrite one word. And we produced this like 8-page newspaper where the story is told, and you read the story, which is one individual, but it's done in the handwriting of 1,334 individuals. Yeah. It's a very cool project. I'm very, very proud of it. And some of the students that were in that class went on to go to university, and then, and I've just kept in touch with one of them in particular, who's been an assistant of mine, and it was a really wonderful project, and we're all very proud of it. Now, I know it sounds like bragging, like, oh, I made this great work, and I'm really proud, but it's like, can I just say, if you don't like your work, don't expect anyone else to. So, yeah, I mean, I make lots of shitty things, and not everything I do is good. And luckily, I only have an hour, so I can only show you the good ones. But these are ones I'm very proud of, where things came together. And not at the time when I was working on it, I didn't necessarily know they would work out or not. You're not always in control of that. As I said, things have a life of their own. But in retrospect, it's one that I'm quite proud of. Let's jump to 2004. And let's stick with the theme of students, because I said I really like doing stuff with kids. Did I say that? Well, now I am. I like collaborating. I like doing things for and with kids. And I was invited by an architect to, I can walk around and it's still going with me, right? Okay, good. So I was invited by an architect friend who was doing the North America's biggest kindergarten. And he had these 2 brick walls. And he thought they were really plain and boring, and he asked if I wanted to collaborate with him on doing something for it. And we came up collaborative with this idea of kind of running the alphabet in bricks. So it's a brick wall, and we substituted like glazed white bricks to create this alphabet. So the alphabet actually, if you find the letter A, you can probably follow it through. There's like D, E, F, G, H. So it just goes like A, B, C, D, J, A, B, C. And then we did that in white bricks, or to make that letter. And then on this side, we'd pop out certain letters in yellow bricks to spell one word, popped out certain letters in red bricks to spell another word, and blue bricks to spell a third word. Can you sort of see that? So it's all brick, so the increment's the same. Then we did the alphabet in white bricks, and then instead of white bricks for certain letters, so the yellow one, you see it, D, I, S, C-O-V-E-R, discover. I mean, they're really hokey, but it's kindergarten. Red, does anyone, oh, prize for anyone who gets the red word. First one. Play. Play, okay, there's your prize. There we go. I'll tell you about this later. Okay. And don't worry, there's lots of these, so you can all get one. Okay, green, blue word. Learn. Who said that? Who said it first? Okay, there we go. So that's one side. And so like it's a class, and so I really like the idea that it's both decorative and beautiful, but also literally the teachers could take the kids outside and teach them the alphabet. Do you teach kindergarten kids the alphabet? I don't know. Well, across the way is the elementary school, so it works. And it's just beautiful material, and again, really worked out great. And there's the other side, and this side faces, this one's too easy, so no prizes. This one faces like a big mall, and it says welcome. Some people, like I posted on Instagram and someone gave me a hard time, and I was like, what do you want? Like, what do we want? You know, Derrida on the side of a kindergarten? Come on, welcome's as good as it comes. I was very defensive. Because I felt it didn't matter what the word was. You know what I mean? It really didn't matter to me. Oh, and then there was another part of the building where we put numbers. Does anyone know what the numbers represent? Hands up first. Does anyone figure out what the numbers mean? Someone raise your hand so I can call you out. Because there's a prize if you get it right.
Height.
Who said height? Okay, what do you mean by height?
Height, a measurement of height that corresponds to the number.
3 what? I think 3 of what? 22 of what?
Feet?
No. Who said bricks? Who said bricks? Okay, there we have a winner. You count the bricks. It's what's. Yeah, okay, you all get them. You come up and get them after. Okay. There's a whole bunch. You see it's a big stack. All you guys pick them up. Yes, it counts the bricks. So you go 1, 2, 3 bricks. So the baseline of each number is on the baseline that the brick's at. So again, another kind of like learning tool. And there's the 0. That should have tipped you off. Whoops. Ooh, that's deceiving. Okay, good. And then inside, you know, you have to have those kind of safety things, like so people won't walk through glass. So you'll get to later, I do a lot of work with found imagery, and on recycling day, I go and cut cardboard out, and there's all these beautiful little symbols. So these are all symbols from cardboard boxes. So the sculpture has like words, letters, numbers, and symbols. Aren't they beautiful? It's almost like another kind of language, but they're all like found images from sides of cardboard boxes, and that will loop around near the end. Okay, so we're backtracking to 2011? I don't know. Sure, yes we are, because that was 2014. Newspapers. I love doing projects with newspapers. I like reaching out. I love doing projects for people that know about stuff, but a lot of the theme for my work is like finding venues that people don't ask to have art, but the art just arrives. I was invited to do a project for an art gallery that did a project called Door to Door. And it was about just taking art out of the gallery. They would, I think the budget for one show a year, they would do a door to door just to kind of like make it more accessible for people. So what's more door to door than the newspaper that comes to your door? So on Friday, September 30th, I took out 2 pages in the Mississauga News. So you turn the page and you see this. And then you turn the page again, you see that. And you're like, what? And so there it is sort of spread out on a light box. So when you hold up that newspaper, because it's the front and back of a piece of paper, part of the letter is on the front of the paper, part of it's on the back. And it explains itself. So we had a little bit of a tussle with them because they didn't want to run it because they thought that that would look like a terrorist message. I thought it looked, yeah. But so what the compromise is, they would write an article about it. So that, which I didn't like, I wanted people to discover it and have that, at least have the article after instead of looking for it. So it was a bit of a compromise. But yeah, but I love this idea of like sitting around someone's home. I purposely picked the Friday because the next newspaper wouldn't come till Monday. And like, let's say someone's iPhone broke or something and you had like time on your hands and you like, the newspaper blew away and you actually got to, you know, that worked for you. But you know what? I kept looking to see if someone wrote about it or blogged it or mentioned it or anything, but it did. But it went into the ether, and I have full faith that, you know, that someone was really touched by it, I hope. Because I think I would have thought it was cool if I had found that in my newspaper. This is one of my all-time favorite projects with an artist named Michael Demonte. It was published by Untitled Text here in Montreal and Nives out of Switzerland. And I was curating an exhibition of Michael Demonte's in Winnipeg. And as a kind of warm-up exercise, I knew he was a big collector of books, found books and stuff like that. And so was I. And so there's a little bit of like, you know, like, kind of like, I wanted to kind of like, well, I just kind of wanted a warm-up exercise for dialogue. And so I said, hey, how about I send you an image and then you send me an image back and then I'll send an image in response to you. And so this project has been going on since 2012. We're up to around our 200th image or so. And it was first published as a book called Call & Response. And the idea was the first image is kind of like a circle on a rectangle. And so I've jumped ahead now. So like, it's called Call & Response. So there's the call image on the left and the response image on the right. And then the response image becomes the call and gets repeated in the book. So every time you have a double-page spread, you don't have to remember the image. Each spread kind of works as its own pair of images. We had a couple rules. One is you had to have it. You couldn't just go on the internet and find that image. It had to be from your collection of books. You couldn't Photoshop, but you could crop to a rectangle. And yeah, you couldn't like Photoshop anything out. It had to be as you found it. It could be a found thing. It could be an image from a book. You couldn't make it. And so it's a project that's kind of running behind my practice and has since 2012, like waiting for him to send an image back to me and then looking for the image and then sending it back to him. And what happened is, we got close. So we started with the circle on a rectangle. We figured we'd end when we got to a circle on a rectangle. We got really close to a circle on a rectangle around image 60, and there we go. Like whatever number that was, we had a circle on a rectangle. But we were still so into it, it was way too early. So let's go for another round. So we went for another round, and we kept going. And then we finished the book, and we had a launch at Art Text. And we were kind of early for the opening, and we were standing. Someone was smoking, so we went outside to smoke. And I looked in the garbage, and there was like a response to his last image that we thought we'd closed the book out. And so when we got back, I sent him the image, and the game has continued. But we haven't got to a circle on a rectangle yet. So I'm kind of getting tired of it, to be perfectly honest. This was a very important exhibition for me. This was an opportunity that someone gave me. I'm a collector. I'm a collector of found things, and I'm a collector of other artists' materials, particularly like 60s and 70s, like ephemera and conceptual art documents. And I kind of had this idea that I wanted to show these influences, these things that I'd collected in relation to like a single work of mine. And a curator named Christina Ritchie at the Contemporary Art Gallery gave me a break. She had a little reading room and allowed me to display. She had this beautiful vitrine. She allowed me to make 3 displays that ran consecutively, and they changed when the exhibition in the other spaces changed. So it would always be a vitrine display of items with one artwork, vitrine display of items with one artwork, vitrine display of items with one work. And it spawned like so much for me, when I'll show you more of it, but I just wanted to acknowledge the importance of that project. Again, not knowing, like, considering all the things I did, like, why would I want to all of a sudden show in a vitrine my collection of other people's things? Like, how is that an artwork? You know what I mean? And so that's that thing about just like knowing there was a kind of impulse to do that. I wasn't sure what it meant. I didn't know where it was going. It didn't connect with what I'd done before, but it's turned out to sort of, as they say, spawn like a whole decade or more's worth of work. What was that year? Well, more than a decade's worth of work. So for instance, this circle to square, they weren't always artist works. They were found things as well. This is a magic trick, which when we walked in, I don't know if people were looking at the screen, but I was showing a video I did called this one, that one, which is kind of showing off found things that I'd collected. So some of these items have made their way into other projects. And actually, you know what? They're not just artist works. This is a Lawrence Wiener, and that's a Franz Erhard Walther catalog that I collected, where he had sketched out the layout for the next show on the catalog from the previous show. I was collecting coins. There's an Enzo Mari multiple. This is one of my favorite multiples by an artist. It's by, oh my God, the name just dropped out of my head. Oh my God, Peter Lawrence Mole. And I don't know if you can read it, but it says, "This paper is yours. This," and he cut out the word paper, which I presume is mine. So he's kept that. Yeah. There's some more Lawrence Wiener and an invitation by James Lee Byers, where he instructed the printer to punch holes randomly in it. There's a plate that I stole from Damien Hirst's restaurant, pharmacy. There's a found piece of cardboard. So actually, I did not realize I was actually starting to show things that I'd found as well as collected. So yeah, it's definitely. So that was 2005. There was a few other projects, but in 2008, I was invited by the Banff Center. It was the 75th anniversary of the Banff Center, and all the departments were supposed to do like 75th anniversary shows. So the Walter Phillips Gallery asked me if I would do a little project for their project room based on their archives. And I thought, sure, I can do that. And they had in their own mind some ideas of what I would do, quantify, but I thought, I'm just gonna go in and check it out. And I came up with a project called Touch Paper Once. And Touch Paper Once is one of my favorite phrases. I learned it maybe 15 years ago. My partner at the time, who had like a day job, like to be more productive in the workplace, they were all like instructed to take this day course on like being more productive in the work course. And he came back and I said, "Oh, how was your day?" He's like, "Oh, we had to take this course on how to be productive in the workplace." And I said, "What did you learn, you know?" And he's like, "Well, actually there's this one interesting concept called touch paper once. It's like, just deal with it. You know, a bill comes in, pay the bill. You know, like, so it's like, what a concept. Like, you finish dinner, put the dishes in the dishwasher. You're like, don't put this interim thing like, oh, here's the stack of bills to be paid, because that's just like more work. So like, just do it, touch the paper once. And I just love the phrase, and it's a concept I do try and take advantage of. Not so good at it, but I just love that phrase. And so I took the kind of literal interpretation of touch paper once and decided that I would go through their archives, which was just like in a basement in these boxes, and touch every piece of paper from the history of this institution. Touch it and look at it. And what I decided to do is I would pick my favorite pieces of paper. I really like alternative histories. Like, I mean, there's all kinds of real histories, but I thought, what if we made a history of this place based on my favorite pieces of paper? Like, isn't that a valid criteria? You know, so they had famous shows like the Banff Purchase, or a famous artist. Like, I wasn't picking any of those things. It was going to be this kind of alternative history. Like, what I decided to show would be from crazy shows, like shows that weren't important or people that weren't important. But what it turned out to be is it became a history of just like correspondence and the running of an institution. There was all kinds of like floor plans. There was like Gestetners. There was like carbon paper. Like, it was for 75 years of correspondence. There's like all the different, there was faxes. And then there was, there was like telexes. There was all the, and of course those things don't last. So it was like telexes that had been like, all you could see was the punch marks and no ink anymore. And so it's just like choosing things for just like their material presence. And through that, made this kind of like a story of the history of the gallery. Very, very idiosyncratic story. And on the backdrop, I sort of, again, so there's this intuitive part, but then there's this real sort of like anal part that like itemized each piece and, so the description of each piece of paper, so there's a little number 17, and then it's 17, and it's like the author and the paper and the size. And so that text was turned on its side. It was like a big list and sort of made to be a kind of graphic that kind of referred to like rain or the mountains or, something sort of very, very landscape-y. This was a really good one. You see this pair of correspondences? So what it was someone had written, like, let's say an artist had written a letter to the curator, and that's in black. Then the curator wrote their notes for like actions that had to happen, like in another pen, and handed it to an assistant, who then in red wrote like done, like when they did this. So there's this whole history of like how things. So I also, in a way, I also was showing something about the behind the scenes of the institution, but I chose it, not for a particular show, but just this kind of machinations of the workings and the history and the layering and the double and, not unlike Robert into handwriting, 2 ways of handwriting. And that's all I meant by like, you keep coming back, like the things that interest you and fascinate you are just the things that interest and fascinate you, and you just intuitively keep coming back to them, and you're so surprised with that when you find consistency, like, oh my God, I've been doing that for 30 years, So whoever you are, get used to yourself. So here's another vitrine show, which is a show called A to B. And a friend of mine ran a little art gallery called MKG 127, which is a great gallery in Toronto. And he always did a summer show where he would get a guest curator. And so my idea was these 4 vitrines just kind of packed with things that all dealt with that all resonated with that title A to B. So whether that's language, whether that's sequence, whether that's duality, A versus B. And it was a combination of found things and artist-made things and art historical things, all kind of mushed together where you weren't sure, what was an artwork and what was a found thing and what was a document. There's some more cardboard. And there would be like translation. To me, that was like A to B, 2 languages. So there would be like, like my favorite dim sum restaurant, there'd be like the instructions for something in like, Cantonese or whatever in English. So I got that from them. So that would have been in the show. There was a sign on a dentist, like vinyl on a dentist door that showed like crooked teeth with braces, straight teeth with braces, straight teeth without braces, So it's just like, and that was just like a photograph of that. So it's all this kind of variation on like progress and symmetry and yeah. It was a very fun project to work on, and kind of informing this sort of grand show that I did a few years later at the power plant, where kind of like it kind of becomes like an art of claiming, like the authorship is not the making of, but the selecting and the arranging of, hence the interior designer mother. This is a show I did in 2011 at my gallery, Robert Birch, and it doesn't seem like it'd be hard to do, but it was kind of hard to do. Like, I love picking things up off the street, finding cardboard and those little shapes and stuff, and I'd turn them into different things, but it was really, difficult for me to actually present or it wasn't difficult, it was that's what this show is. It's called Things Exist. It was this idea that just things exist, and that's enough to just present the things that exist. So it was an exhibition of found cardboard framed and a series of other found cardboard, like in these small vitrines. This was like 2 books. It's like a birding book. And birding books, for people to identify birds. And on the back of a birding book, they often have like a scale so that when that bird is dead on the ground, you could measure and say, and put your notes, I got a 3-inch, finch or whatever like that. But of course, if you print a ruler on fabric and you stretch it on a book, it's not always going to be the same. So I found a couple of these birding books and just put the alignment kind of up together. So, and you can see it. So it starts quite in alignment here, and by the time it gets up there, it goes off, and then comes back into alignment probably. So one of the, yeah. So these are like some of the found cardboard that are sort of intentionally presented in these very specific frames. And in the bottom left-hand corner of each frame, you you can sort of make it out. Can you see there's a little bit of flutter happening there? A little bit of flutter happening there. There's an embossed text. And the embossed text says things exist, example number, and I fill that in. And then I made up these categories: one thing, two things, more than two things, the same thing, the same day, counting. And then I would just look at that object and say, you know, is it one thing, two things, or more than two things, and check off that box. And sometimes it could be one thing and two things, depending on how I kind of. So it was like about this kind of pseudo system that kind of allowed me to kind of organize the work. And it's really funny, I did not realize it till now, but the show at the power plant's called 1 and 2 and more than 2. And there it is there. So yeah, so that probably would have been two things, same day, and maybe more than two things because it's like two shapes and a rectangle, so it's three shapes on the two things. So basically I could rationalize anything. That's definitely one thing. And it wouldn't be same day because it's a single thing, so that would be very few check marks on that one. Two things, probably not the same day, not more than two things. Those are just like, you know, when people are advertising cleaning services or learn guitar, it's just the back of it with the tape that they taped it onto the pole. I really enjoy being given opportunities to present things outside of like a gallery context. I think I said that. And sometimes, you know, I choose it to be a newspaper. I did a project where I gave away a free blanket every day for 100 days. This was sort of on the other extreme. This is the Louis Vuitton store in Toronto was opening. And they built this vitrine with the purpose of commissioning artists to make works for the vitrine, and they would last for like 3 or 4 months, and the next artist would come in. So my project is called Duly Noted, and you can see the context in which the work is presented. And so I dug into my like archive of found materials, some of the things you might recognize from various other things, maybe not, and paired 2 images together, scanned them really high resolution, built light boxes for them and presented them in a grid of 2 objects per light box, 4 rows, 2 across of objects as a kind of presentation structure. Sort of standalone, something that relates to the history of art, the grid, the Beschers, all kinds of people showing taxonomy and stuff. One thing I should point out is they insisted that the label be on front because they were afraid that people would think it was a store display and people would ask for the piece of paper with the 2 on it. Yeah, it's really surprising. Like, I mean, I'm being sort of criticizing them, but it's great that they gave me that opportunity. And there's clearly no one's going to mistake this for like a product that you can kind of buy. But I guess, like, you know, same with the newspaper agreeing for me to do that project and needing to explain it and stuff like that. When you do things in the public realm, I guess you have to be aware that there could be misreadings, and the people that are sponsoring it are trying to get ahead of those misreadings right off the bat. So unfortunately, it made me put the label on the front of the piece. But one thing I wanted to point out is, so even though it sort of borrows from the history of art and the grid and all that kind of stuff, it also was borrowing from the display in the store. And so if you notice, they have like grids with shelves, often 2 things on the shelf paired. And so I really like the kind of symmetry between the things. And the title, Duly Noted, I was really struggling with the title, but I really thought Duly Noted kind of settled it because it was sort of like, it's sort of like these things are clearly made with care and precision and a lot of decisions are made. But like, maybe look at these with a similar kind of like mindset. I was kind of putting these, so I wasn't, you know, I wasn't sure what I was doing. I'm still not sure, but I think it kind of works together. I wasn't calling into question those objects as who doesn't love a well-made bag, you know? Like beautiful craftsmanship and amazing colors and attention to detail. I mean, those are all the things that art is made out of. I mean, we can critique the politics of it and the price point and all those kind of things, but just like the object versus object. So I was just trying to like bring their objects in relation to my interest in objects, my interest in objects and display in relation to their interest in display, and seeing them as kind of not as dissimilar as maybe we, might initially think that they are. And that's why that title, Duly Noted, just seemed like the right phrase to kind of tie that together. I remember that being a real struggle for me. Titles are generally pretty easy, and that one was really hard. And I really felt when I got that title that I really got the work or understood the work myself. So here we are at the piece that is sort of like one of my favorite things I've ever done. It was at the Power Plant show, and I was invited to do the show at the Power Plant. Well, it's a long story. I don't even know if I'm going to tell the whole story. But there's a really big room at the power plant, and there are a few people that really nailed that room when they had shows. And I think as an artist, there's not just making the work. There's the presentation of the work, and that's like probably at least half of the work is how the work is presented, or where the work is presented, or the scale of the work. And I find this all the time. Like as I said, my friend Michael Klein has a gallery, and this artist will have worked for 3 years, and they have the show, and they know exactly where everything's going to go. And instead of like seeing the show for what it is and like realizing there's too much work and it's not to the benefit of the show, they just like plow that stuff in. And sometimes they'll come in and they'll ask me what I think, and I'll be like, I think you should take those 6 things out. That's my favorite work. And I try to explain to people that it's like, it might be your favorite work, but it's not going to look good in this space. Like, there's not just work, there's the presentation of the work, and that's a big thing. So I was really aware when I was invited to show at the power plant that I had this massive space, and not that many people kind of nailed it. And so to me, the art was like, not just the art, but like what you put in it and how you put it in and how you scaled it and certain kinds of decisions that went into it. So the starting point was I was invited by someone to make an exhibition of younger artists. Someone had won an award. This woman named Sarah Milroy had won an award. I think it was $10,000. But she was like a wealthy person. And it was like, well, I don't need the $10,000. I'm really honored that you rewarded me for my contribution to the community, but I'm going to give that money to someone to make an exhibition. And she picked me to make an exhibition because I'm known for someone who likes younger artists, is not afraid of getting behind people before they're well known. I actually take a lot of interest in that and really feed on that. And she asked me if I would curate a show of younger artists. And I said, I would, but you know what? Like, nothing's worse than a show of younger artists. Nothing's worse than a show of gay artists. Nothing's worse than a show of women artists. Like, anytime you have to like put the word before the artist, that's like not a good idea. I said, how about I curate a show and I will include as many young artists as I feel are appropriate to it. So we'll put these young artists in the context of something larger, and that'll benefit everybody. So that was the idea. The idea was I embarked on like a year's tour of the Toronto community, looking at younger artists and like responding to what people were making and thinking about older artists that had connections with them, and put together this show called More Than Two, Let It Make Itself. It was done in the context of a a museum retrospective, and the show is called 1 and 2 and More Than Two. 1 was solo works, 2 was collaborations with writers, and More Than Two was this curatorial project where I ended up including, I think it was like 101 artists, collectives, and duos, and something like 226 artworks and objects. And I wouldn't just pick artworks. I would also include, oh, there's verses front and center right there. I would include like failed attempts and like tools. There was also like a tour of studios, and I felt like I was like bringing out like objects that were normally like hidden in the studio out to the general kind of public. So for instance, there's like a palette, someone's painting palette. You know how some people work with like tracing paper to transfer imagery onto like paintings, but they would reuse it 3 or 4 times, choosing that. I'd see stuff in the corner, I'd be like, what's that? And it's like, oh, that's a rejected like mount or whatever like that. Show that. And I got everyone's permission to show these kinds of things. So it was really about like the creative process, about the studio. It was a lot about the hand, but I was very careful not to include any images of hands or any images of people. It was all the kind of results of the making of things. There, I was just telling you about that tracing paper. There's the piece of tracing paper where the person had traced a number of times. This is a tool that an artist named Ken Nickel had created for himself. He realized he was too good at drawing, so he, I'm sure you've all done this trick, so he put the pen on the end of a wire so that he would not be in his control, so he would be able to make a more interesting drawing. So that's a drawing tool. Whatever. On and on and on. And I designed a lighting system for it. There's nothing on the wall, so everything's just in the vitrines. The vitrines were designed. I worked with a furniture designer on the legs of the vitrines, so that when they were singular, they had a kind of presence, but when you put them together, they made a kind of trestle. So they're both intentional and repetitive, but not like drawing too much attention to themselves. Lots of line drawings and crossing, which is one of the images that appears so much in the show itself. Yeah. Oh, and there's very little literature. There's little numbers beside each artwork so that you could find out who made something. You can see right there. And it came with a checklist that you carried around. But what I really liked about that is we had super famous people like Michael Snow and all kinds of stuff. You had to find the work you liked, and then you would read about it. So I find like when I go to museums, I literally go to the label. Like it's like a Pavlovian. How do you not go to the label? And then you look at the work through the lens of the label. And so this was about making you look at the work and then have to read about it. Because you'd have to see the work to say, oh, what's 17? And you'd seen the work before you read who made 17. Also, you couldn't just go and find the Michael Snow because there was no way to find where Michael Snow was. Michael Snow was just a random number because the numbering system was, like everything was just hilly-nilly. You couldn't find the Michael Snow. You would have to find a work you liked and looked up to see if that was the Michael Snow. So it was a bit of a game, and that's like a big theme in my work is games and puzzles, and so that was weaved through there as well. And it's funny, I had to do a lot of public programming with it. It's like a big museum, and I'd have to speak and stuff like that. And one guy got really mad at me because I actually told people who made the work. And he thought that it should just be a list of artist names on the wall, and it should be this collective portrait, and everyone is kind of anonymous. And I thought that was an interesting critique. I thought I struck the balance well, whereas you do get that. It's so much work to look it up that you really do have to kind of look and enjoy it. But it's still there if you want to know, well, who made that particular thing? There is still that opportunity to do that. Like, yeah, look at the chosen artwork and then the pedestal that it sits on. So everything was kind of reinforcing itself. The plexi tops were sized to the tallest object in that particular vitrine. So there was this sort of cityscape that formed, and that formed from the layout. It wasn't choreographed. It just made itself. And I chose a lot of artists that worked with collections themselves within. So it was like a collection of collections, studies and tests and working through. And there's the Michael Snow right there. The youngest artist was, I think, 20, and the oldest was like 85 or 86 or 87 or something like that. There was pretty much everyone from age 20 to, like, let's say, maybe like 60, and then it would sort of get a little more sporadic after that. And within the context of the show, so it was 1 and 2 and more than 2. And the one show was this video that I showed when we first walked in. And I might just put it on after once we're doing questions and stuff. We'll just play it and you can watch it. Basically, it's my collection of found cardboard and other objects just kind of being presented to you in a kind of narrative. Oh, and then my favorite art form of all, Instagram. Yeah, I don't know what to say about Instagram. But yeah. So these are some of my postings. So it's a chance for me to, I used to take thousands and thousands of photographs of things that I found on the street, and it would just end up in like, you know, when you used to have cameras and you'd get the roll of film and you get it developed and you get it back, and I had thousands of boxes of pictures of found things on the street that just went into nowhere land. And now with Instagram, like, we all take those things and we share, and it's a chance to kind of share your sensibility and promote things you're doing and turn people on to other artists that you love. And I have made tons of friends through Instagram. I've curated artists that I've met on Instagram. People send me out of the blue. Like, people just constantly ask me for my address because they see something they know I'd like. I'm gonna have to do a show of all the things that people sent me that they think is my sensibility. People have made tattoos. Numerous people have made tattoos of like diagrams that I posted on Instagram. Sometimes they ask your permission, which I don't have to give, and I mean, which they don't need my permission, and some people just do it and tell you after the fact. And I feel it's sort of like somewhat revealing about what you're looking at and sharing. And every so often, like, I'll put up an image and then I'll pull it back as, wait, that's informing my new show. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like you're giving it away. You just kind of don't want someone else to make a show based on that, you know, based on giving away all your like sources and stuff. So it's really a study in, like, you know, not being too guarded. And it's really come back. As I said, people have curated me because of it, and people send me things, and people constantly say, here's an image I think you'd like. And it's just, it's been a pretty fascinating experience. I'm so not a social media person, but I'm really quite gung-ho about that. It's also just this great archive. I'll look back, like, sometimes literally, like, I'm bored and I'll just look back at past postings and remember what I was like interested in. It's like, oh yeah, that image, that was a great image. And yeah. Come on, look at that one. Draw your measuring tool. But it's also not unlike some of those vitrine displays I was doing when you see them in the grid, like the found coin and, you know, packaging and a book you wanted to turn someone on to. Like, literally these things in another life could have been, like, all these things could have been in a vitrine. Games, packaging. I think we've neared the end. Oh, and I will leave. Oh no, I won't leave on one. Sorry, how are we doing for time? Getting boring. Okay. I also do big public sculpture. So not only do I do these like free newspapers and kinds of things, there's also, you know, have to pay the bills. And one of the ways I do it is with public sculpture, but I bring that same sensibility, like I hope, to the work. So this was a recent commission called Two Circles, like a big high-rise tower in Toronto. There's this big black circle on this wall, and I'll show you the other one is on that wall over there. It's deceivingly simple. The scale's pretty enormous. That's like a 22-foot circle. But it's not what you think it is. It's actually made up of 1.6 million handmade ceramic pieces. Yeah. So for instance, that's like the black meeting the white. The sticks are about 55 millimeters tall. Each stick is handmade, and each stick is hand broken. So you get this little wonky line. There's this wonky line within each line breaks again. I'll show you what I mean by that. There, you see that moment where it breaks? Sometimes they'll break down and go into the next line. So there's like, from outside, it's just like this big black circle, and as you enter it, there's these layers and layers of kind of like attention to detail and nuance and difference and subtlety and repetition. And yeah, that's the white one. And this is what I'll end on. It's a sign I got commissioned. Don't worry, I'm going to blow it up bigger so you can read it. I got commissioned. I was in a show. It was the opening show of a private, like, gallery / collector's enterprise in a back alley. They got this warehouse space, and the people owned a library. And so the opening show they wanted to do was a show on, like, language. And so they asked me to participate in it. And my participation was to make the sign for the gallery. They were really going to have like a, it's called scrap metal. They're going to have like a sign, scrap metal with their logo. And I was like, no, 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 no. We can do something way better than that. Like someone, by the time they come down that street and go to this and go down the alley and find the way, if they see this thing above the door, they're going to know they found the gallery. Trust me, this is a good thing. And so it's my contribution to the show, and they've kept the sign as the sign for the gallery. Kind of got all the bases covered. So that's it. So maybe we can turn the house lights on, or whatever you call them, and we can put the video on the background, and people can ask questions. I believe there's like a microphone somewhere. Oh, I'm going to tell you about this project while we're finding out where the microphone is. And I'm just going to see. Can we put the video on now? Oh, thanks a lot. So the prize I was giving out, sort of like false promise, because you can all get it for free. I'm in Montreal in two places right now. At the Musée d'Art Contemporain. On the way to the bathroom, you go upstairs to the second, there's that curved wall. There's a piece installed there that's a collaboration I did with my mom. I've done a lot of collaborations. Are you in the project? Oh my God, you guys all moved here? Oh, amazing. Oh, great. 2/7 of 2/6? Yeah, 2/6 of verses, which is like, sorry, I don't want to, sorry, fellow students, but you've some very talented artists here. There's a part of a collective called Verses, which is this amazing collective based in Toronto that do awesome things. I will tell you one amazing project, which I tell everybody about. We have like a Nuit Blanche. Do you guys have Nuit Blanche? Yeah. So for Nuit Blanche, I'm going to probably bastardize it. I'll tell my story. You can defend yourself later. They had a project called 1-800-IS-IT-ART, or 1-888-IS-IT-ART. And what? 1-855-IS-IT-ART. And so basically, because the thing about a Nuit Blanche, right, you'll see like a pile of bicycles. Well, it might be Ai Weiwei, or it might just be a pile of bicycles. So you can call up and people would man the phones and you'd be like, I see a pile of pink bicycles. Is it art? And they're like, no, that's not art. You know? And then they got artists to man the things. And could they just ad-lib, do whatever they wanted? Or yeah. How brilliant is that? It was a really good project. OK, so I did a collaboration with my mom who you saw. She's super creative, and I get a lot of my creativity from her. And she was famous for drawing tulips. And later on in her life, I wanted to do something with her, and I got her to draw on pieces of 8.5 by 11, just rows and rows of tulips, like 6 or 8 pages of those. And I just took them with me, and then I scanned them on the scanner. And you know, the scanner always works. It never doesn't work. I mean, it's amazing. Well, this time I scanned it, and then I rotated the image, and it went like this. And it like broke up the image into the most amazing, beautiful image you've ever seen in your life. And I did that for each one, and it made this glitch just for this project with my mom, and made the most amazing set of drawings in the world. And so there it was. There was my class. I just literally took that drawing and like took it to the fabric and say, blow this up like 600%, and just water jet cut them out of aluminum and painted them white, and it's on the wall. So you can see that piece at Musée d'Art Contemporain. It's in their collection. I think it's up there pretty permanently. And I'm in the new Mois de la Photo, which is the month of photography now called Momenta or whatever. Did I got it right? Yeah. And I think it just opened last week. And my contribution to the show is an 8-page spot the difference game. You know, spot the difference where like 2 images almost look the same, but you have to find the differences. And so it's done with art text. So there's a stack of them here. So first come, first serve to take them away. And if you run out and you want one, art text has them for free as kind of giveaways. Does anyone have a question? Or did I just like say everything and answer all your questions? Really?
Maybe they need incentive. Don't just give those away yet.
There's probably as many as there are people. Yes.
Hold on a sec.
Oh.
Can I get you this just so we can hear it?
You use the word material presence, and actually when I saw this video for the first time at the power plant, I always wanted to ask you if you've been watching ASMR videos or had become familiar with them, like on YouTube.
What is that?
Oh, it's like people like hold objects in weird ways, and it's supposed to trigger your the like kind of like tingly feeling that runs up the back of your neck. I was always very curious. Does anyone else know what I'm talking about? Yeah, yeah. They're really great videos, and they're all like sometimes cropped really closely and it's just like, yeah, people really getting into the material present. So if you don't know about them, I'll have to send you one.
Yeah, please.
And sorry, a second question. I was just curious, what was the name of the show that you showed at Birch with the cardboard cutouts?
Things Exist.
Things Exist.
Which
Thank
I mean, I think I read it. I think it's like a Mallarmé quote. It's like, things exist. Our job is to present. I mean, I forget where the quote, but there's a really nice quote that it comes from, which I forgot because that's like a while ago. I probably, if I'm going to give a talk, I should have the quote from that. But I didn't know you were going to ask me about that. There is a great quote about, yeah, things exist. Our role is to, yeah, like present them or something like that. So, yeah. I know. You can do it.
Oh man.
Mike
Okay.
Phobic?
Yeah, a little bit. Excuse me?
Hello, Renee. Sorry, you're next.
I was just wondering, and I found a lot of the pieces you have so much individual creativity, and you seem to put a lot of like focus into individuality, but then it seems like flooded with just so many of it. Is this like a political stance towards like creation as an occupation or as a means to just create something, and then you act as a curator in all this, or is this more like an interest of collecting? I just find that, for example, in mass collections, you lose the sense of every single piece. They're just flooded like grains of sand, grain of sand in the beach. And I was just wondering if it was sort of like a stance, a political stance.
Right. No, but I think I'm attuned to what the right amount is. Like, I don't think it is grains of sand. Like 221 objects in a really big room was just the right amount. You know what I mean? Like, you could see all of them pretty easily without getting too exhausted. Like, it wasn't 600, do you know what I mean? It wasn't 30, so they're too precious. And I was trying to make a kind of collective portrait of Toronto, so it had to be big. Like, I think I'm pretty good at, like, that's the interior designer in me, you know what I mean? Like the feng shui and the right thing and stuff like that. And so it's, it's trying to be generous. I definitely trying to err on including rather than not including. Like, I say, like, I'd rather be like Woody Allen rather than like Kubrick, you know, like rather than like 6 genius works, I'd rather make a work a year, and some of them are great and some of them are not. So it's just about more like, it's just like, so maybe it's like, I don't know if I'd use your word political, but it's just like getting up in the morning. It's about sharing the wealth. It's about including a lot of people. It's about getting the energy from other people. It's about, you know, and each one, I mean, I'm also not very good about general questions because like each piece has its own answer. You know what I mean? Like when it's 20,000 coins, that was like the right amount for that room. That created a story that got doubled. Like the story was enough to read, but also you got lost in it. So it became a puzzle. Like each time I feel like I found the right balance. The 29,064 X's, that was his number of years. Then I had to scale it back to whatever was the right size to make the volume right. So it's ebbs and flows. Sometimes the number directs it, and sometimes the space directs it. And sometimes, like if the number's not right, then I can't do it. Like when they told me there was 1,334 students, like that seemed doable. If they had told me 10,000 students, not so doable. And also I'm really like, am what I say. So like when I said 1,334 for 1,000, like I really impressed upon the students. They had to get every student. Like, what are we gonna do if 3 don't wanna do it? Like, we had to solve that problem. And what's the right number that we would accept and still feel morally okay about not having to put an asterisk and saying like roughly, you know what I mean? Like I feel there's a kind of truth to what I do, and that's very important because like the Christian book text thing, like where each letter replaces the other, like people are like, no, but it's not right. It's like, no, it's right. Like there's a kind of honesty that has to come through, and that, I know I'm talking all around different things, but that does come down to numbers and stuff like that. And so basically I'll stay away from the things that don't, you know, that don't work out. Each time there seems to be the right answer or the right number, whatever like that.
Thank you. That's fair.
So, Renee, did you want to ask something?
I'm just curious about, you almost throw away that, you know,
Renee, could we get you
a
a
special story for you, and I wondered how that came about. I'm sure there was a story behind that.
Oh, she's asking about how did Colm
How you
Toibin.
got the exact, how how Colm Toibin agreed to write a short story of a certain number of words.
I know, aren't I
for you.
lucky?
It's
Well,
like a throwaway line, but really.
yeah, there's only so much you could tell. Like I could literally probably tell you an hour about each work, but I had to jump over things. I had a friend who was head of the Toronto Writers Festival that they do at Harbourfront, and I originally wanted Paul Auster to write it. And I had written to Paul Auster because that seemed like a natural fit, someone who deals with counting and quantity and enumeration. It seemed a really good fit. And he was really receptive, but ultimately said no. And I was kind of getting in a bit of a panic. And I reached out to this person. I said, can you think of a writer that would be open to something like this? Like, it's really a lot to ask to write to count. And he said, like, I'm really good friends with Colm. I'm going to be seeing him. He used to be a travel writer. And so he's probably not afraid of writing. He's the nicest guy in the world, and he probably would do me this favor. Turns out Colm is the nicest guy in the world, and he brings out a character named Malik. And so the story is Malik, and he's got Malik. So every time PEN Canada asks him to write something, every time da-da-da asks him to, he brings Malik out. So he, in his own way, has found a way to write for other people when they ask him to write. So I think he's going to probably come up with the Malik stories at some point, because he brings Malik out every time someone asks him to do something. And so the other artist, who's one of my favorite artists, I'm really bad with names, come on, like balloons in the air, in the room, the lights on, the lights off.
Martin Creed.
Martin Creed, thank you. So there's a Martin Creed monograph, and they got Colm Toibin to write a short story in that. And in that story, Malik goes around some city and comes across things that are Martin Creed works, and only describes them, but doesn't call them art. Just says like, oh, I saw this room with the balloons or whatever like that. So that's why he agreed to do it. He had a mechanism for absorbing requests like that. Yeah. I think you had a question. I got it. I got the mic. I got the conch shell.
So I'm wondering, as an artist who obviously makes use of a lot of conceptualist strategies, I identify with you, and one thing that's really interesting to me is that sort of fallow period between ideas. And as I find for myself as an artist who's not materially based, I can't just go like build stretchers or like fling some paint around. So sort of wondering, like, it's kind of a personal question, like, what do you reach for in fallow periods between ideas, and or like, do you have some sort of diary or catalog system, which is like a sort of storage to go back to? Obviously, like your Instagram plays some sort of function like that, but I'm wondering about those periods in between projects, and yeah.
That's a great question. Lots of answers. Let's see. I say yes to everything, hence the Woody Allen thing. Because didn't he say like it's like 90% of success is showing up or whatever like that? I'm sure I'm paraphrasing it wrong. I just like to keep busy, and I'm really surprised by the things that turn out and don't turn out. And so yes, I do say yes to everything, literally everything. And it pains me when I have to say no for something, because I don't know what that's going to yield. I've also kind of like that idea of like storing up ideas, which also reminds me of Woody Allen, because I think if you've ever seen the documentary on him, he's like has this box of like ideas, and every time he's in a movie, he lays them out on the bed and like decides which one he's going to do. I don't do that, and I have way more ideas than I could ever make, but I've kind of come to a comfort level of just like grabbing the closest one in my mind. You know what I mean? Rather than like digging for the perfect one, because I think you can waste a lot of energy on the perfect one. Like the good enough one is good, and then you make it the great one. Like the turning it into the thing is the art. The idea doesn't have to be so great to start with. It's got to be good enough. So that's something I've learned. And sometimes, and also just really, some things turn out better than others. They just do, and it's not always the ones you think are going to be, great. Because I was actually really, really worried about this one, like this project. I thought it was like a really shitty picture, and it's a thing about the month of photography, and it should have been a better picture, and like I know what it could have been a great picture, but I kind of wanted to play against like what would it be like. Wouldn't it be great to put a shitty picture in Wad de la Photo? You know what I mean? Like, because it's like all these great photographers. Because I wanted the photo to function as something else. It really could have been any photo. And so like, and I was really upset because I've been working too hard and I wasn't ready for the photo shoot. Like I hired a photographer to come in and like I hadn't figured out the angle and the lighting wasn't right and he took it and I really wasn't happy with it. But now I'm really excited about it because I've since moved and now it's like a document of this thing that no longer exists. And I kind of like that it might be kind of like disappointing to, let's say, real photographers, but then they find the story about it and then they go the aha. I call it the aha moment. Like I love turning people around. You know what I mean? Like I love people, like that big circle, people like, fuck, that cost $1 million, a fucking black circle, are you kidding me? You know, and then you're like, did you look at it? You know, and then they realize the labor and the, you know, the detail and the things that reveal. And so I'm answering lots of your different questions. And you know what? I love, okay, I love like pulling out projects that I've done before and looking at them and realizing, yeah, like, cause literally, I'm just like you, we're all the same. We're all like, oh, I'm shitty, you know, like I'm a shitty artist. It's like I fluky and I just made it through and, you know, and it's like at a certain point you can't, you know what I mean? Like I know you're looking at me like, shut up, like, you know, you made it, you're okay. But it doesn't go away, you know? And so, but I do take a lot of pleasure of looking back at works and looking back at a work made 25 years ago, like that two kinds of confidence, like great piece. Like it's not, you know, there's that great Albert Einstein quote, make things as simple as possible, but not any simpler. And that's really like, you know, just like what do you need to get your point across, you know, like what's the right thing, you know, to kind of do. Same with that, like this, I needed a busy image that I could do the spot the difference, you know, like, so it's not the best image, it's not an image like, wow, that's a beautiful image, I love that image, you know, like, you know. Sorry. Probably talked too long. We have someone at the back.
What was, I was just curious, what was your, were you surprised?
Hold on.
Okay.
For the record.
It's for the record, you know, for the document.
I was curious if you were caught off guard or what your response was to when Joshua Schwabel posed as you for that show at Articule. I was with him when he got the acceptance letter and he was quite worried and I wasn't from Montreal at the time and I was just curious what your take was on that and how did you respond and engage with it?
Thanks for bringing that up. I'll tell you guys what it was. There's an artist named Josh Schwabel, this awesome, amazing artist who's a troublemaker, who kind of wanted to play with the system and the role of names, and he thought that, so his project was, and he's done lots of things, you can Google him and see his stuff, but the project he did with me was, he created a person named Micah Lexier. He got a Facebook page. I wasn't on Facebook. He got a Gmail email address, michaellexier@gmail.com. And he applied for a show here as Micah Lexier. And I think he said he made a really shitty proposal because his idea was to see if they would give Micah Lexier a show, even if it was a shitty show. And he did. They did. And then he was to reveal to them that he wasn't Micah Lexier and this was the content and stuff like that. And then it became like a big issue. It's like, oh, should we tell Micah and stuff like that? And they eventually did. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, why wouldn't I love that? Like, what's not to love? I'm super honored. Like someone picked me. Like they thought that I was an artist enough that my name would get a show. Like I didn't see myself that way. He did. So that was interesting to see how someone saw you. And I just love the slippage. And then I actually participated in it, so I got kind of involved, and he did a display, and I gave him something of mine where I had done a similar kind of thing because as I said, I don't make any of my work. So once I did a print edition, and I didn't feel right signing the edition, so I got the printer to sign it for me. And I said, like, will be signed by, you know, John Smith, who was signing Micah Lexier's name. So we put one of those prints in that to show the kind of loop and to show that that was a strategy, something I was interested in. So, I mean, I love it. I loved it a lot. But the thing I hate about it, then I took over the Facebook page. And I hate Facebook. And it took me like a year to get the nerve to finally, like, delete Facebook. So, yeah. But I did keep the Gmail account. So.
have a Canada art cat? Have you heard about the Canada
No,
art
but I got
cats?
Art World Haters. I got an Art World Haters meme. It was an image of, do you guys know Art World Haters? Yeah. Anyway, I survived because what it was the meme, or did you call it a meme? I don't know. So it was an image of John Hamm smiling, like looking all like not drunk John Hamm, and it said, "When Micah Lexier curates you into a show," and then there was like all disheveled and like run down John Hamm's, like when Micah Lexier doesn't include you in his show or whatever like that. Yeah.
Maybe we'll take one more question. You've got to enjoy your night in Montreal.
Yeah, on this, I think I'm feeling tired, and if I'm tired, you're tired, right? It's like stuffy, and we've talked long enough. Better, pressure's on. Oh my God. If it's a good question, you get the whole stack. Oh no, you already got one already.
I already have one.
Yeah. Dime a dozen, those things. Printed edition of 2000, you're all okay.
Not too much of a shitty question then. I was just wondering if you ever collect like ephemeral media, or if you only collect physical media. Just there's so many good found images online. I don't know how you like hold yourself back from collecting all of that stuff too.
Well, this comes back to your question. It's just about appropriateness. So that's a never-ending pit. So like I can't. Like so I've left myself to the limit of things I can find. If I can buy the book, I can get it. If I could see the piece of paper on the street, like that's the sort of just an intuitive knowing. Like let's just be realistic here about what you could do, because literally you would never eat or walk outside again if it was about collecting amazing images, on the internet. Yeah.
So is it more about your intuition or like a sort of slightly set of rules that you have for yourself?
Like a balance of things. I mean, I find like I like circles and squares. I mean, you've been watching, you know what I mean? Like I like games and puzzles and packaging and boxes and things. But then there's like weird things that break out that get out of that. And I know you guys are in school, and you poor people, you have to defend yourself all the time, and I feel so sorry, because in art you don't have to defend yourself, you just make the shit. And and either it resonates with people or it doesn't resonate with people, and that's that. So like just get through school, say what you have to say to the teacher, and then just do what like makes your heart, pitter patter and go good, and you're good. You're good.
Thank you.